taking a look at Piacenza, June 16th, 1746. Gorgeous cover on this game. This is published by Europa Simulazioni. I've done some coverage of their games before. I actually picked this up a couple of years ago, and I didn't get around to playing it. And then I put it on my sort of like New Year's resolutions games I was going to play list last year, 2023. I'm a huge fan of 18th century history, and the warfare of the period is super fascinating. So this is an auto buy for me. And it's also designed by Enrico Acerbi, who is credited as the co-designer on Inferno, Levian Campaign. He's also got a ton of games to his name. He seems to be the foremost expert on Italian history because all of his games involve Italy. I think he did also another game, World War I. He's done some World War I stuff about the Italian front. I can't remember off the top of my head right now. I'll add it as a note here. But anyways, this is Piacenza. This is a regiment-level tactical game about the Battle of Piacenza, as you can see here. So I've actually, I'm not exaggerating when I tell you this, I've actually had this game set up for over a year on this table, and I just have not been able to get around to it, and we're about ready to do it. So you can see here, I wanted to go through the game and tell you a little bit about it. There's some really interesting ideas going on here to kind of reflect the period. The counter art is pretty gorgeous. So this battle, 1746, took place in Piacenza, Italy, or near Piacenza, Italy. It was a combined Franco-Spanish army, which you can see set up here around the town and along the west here, facing off against the Austrians, who are set up along these rivers and ditches that they've built. And essentially, historically, what was trying to happen was the Austrians, who outnumbered the Franco-Spanish, were trying to strike a decisive blow against them, and the French. So the Spanish were in Piacenza. The French came to their aid, and then they were like, "We need to get out of here. There's not enough food in the town. The only food the town has is cheese." Because it was a big cheese town, apparently. But they didn't have anything else. They didn't have the ability to make bread. The Austrians had kind of severed the rivers and waterways that were used to mill grain. So the French came to the Spanish's aid, and then they were like, we need to force battle so that we can get out of here and get to a better area. And historically, this was an Austrian victory over the Franco-Spanish, I believe. Of note of this battle is a name that you might be familiar with if you study North American history, which is the Marquis de Montcalm. He was actually he was some sort of officer, not a major officer, but he was an officer in the French army at this battle, and he sort of led a fighting retreat under some severe circumstances and earned acclaim for that performance. I don't know which unit he's supposed to be in. I can look it up and see if I can find it, but it was this battle where he kind of made a name for himself, and obviously after this, he would go on to become the commander-in-chief of French forces in North America during the French and Indian War, which took place, 10 years later? So yeah, pretty interesting connection there. War of Austrian Succession is a really interesting conflict, at least to my mind. Not a lot of games on it, but this one was an auto pickup, and if you just look at the map, how beautiful the map is, I believe this is based off of an actual period map. And none of the details have been changed to fit hexes. So the hexes were put on the map, but you can see these rivers. Sometimes they go along a hex side. Sometimes they move through the middle of the hex, like here, for example. It's also got a really nice texture. It's got that kind of like parchmenty texture that Europa Simulazioni does. In general, the components for ES games are really nice. The rule book here, really nice quality paper. And just in general, it's a very nice looking game. So what they've done here is to indicate where there's a river hex side. They've actually made the hex side blue so as not to disturb the graphics on the map, which I think is great. It looks fantastic, especially if you look at some of the fortifications in and around the town of Piacenza, which is really cool. It's just really, really nice looking on the table. So this game is, like I said, it's a regimental scale battle. It's about the Battle of Piacenza. You've got infantry, cavalry, and artillery, with the overriding sort of tactical doctrine being linear warfare. And that's going to express itself when you move units. In this game, units have zones of control, but they also have what are called engagement zones. And engagement zones extend out from a unit 3 hexes. And so when you move into an engagement zone, or you're in an engagement zone and you want to move, you must move with your formation, and this is a formation-based activation system. You must move with your formation in line, meaning you have to be 1 or 2 hexes away from the nearest friendly unit of your formation so that you can approach the enemy in that line. And then there's a really interesting combat system in this game. So there is artillery bombardment and fire, as you can see here. There's melee and so forth, but very specific conditions under which you can melee and fire, for that matter. There's no unit facing, but artillery does have unit facing, and so some of these stacks you can see, like here, there's an artillery unit pointing in that direction towards the Spanish. So each of the turns is an hour, and this is the full campaign. So we're going to go, I believe, 12 turns, or maybe less. But what's interesting about this is that when you engage in fire combat, you designate all your fire combats, and then there's a volley from both sides simultaneously, and then if you elect to, you can do a second volley as part of the same combat. So there's going to be some really interesting, I guess, tactical decisions to be made. You can also do the same with artillery, but if artillery fire twice, there's a chance that the cannons are done for the day because they have been ruined or overheated or what have you, the stress on the barrel. So there's lots of interesting rules that kind of evoke the period there, and I'll show you as we play how the combat, happens, like the procedure where you can get multiple volleys against units, and it's interesting too because like you can outnumber a unit, but the defending unit can only fire at one of the attacking units. So in general, you want to try and get 2 versus 1 regiments on each other. There's also this concept of strength points. So the strength points are actually measured in actual regiments. So you can see this unit here in yellow is a light infantry unit that's got 2 light infantry regiments in it. Or sorry, battalions, I believe. This one has 4, and if you have a bigger unit like Gyulai here is 4 strength points. It's 4, battalions there. When he takes hits from bombardment or fire, there's a chance that you can, after you take your hit, that you can actually move up, sort of abstractly in the hex, move up the supporting lines into the front line to take the space of units that have been hit by fire or casualties. So kind of counterintuitively, the larger your unit is, the less likely you are to suffer step losses or routes or things like that. And the bigger your unit is, the more strength points, the more likely it is that you'll be able to fill in those casualties with the supporting lines behind. So bigger units, while you may seem like a juicier target for fire, are actually harder to drive off, which is kind of cool. It's kind of interesting. I haven't seen that in a game but reflected that way before. The engagement zone thing that I mentioned is kind of interesting. I'm just trying to look at some of the other stuff. There's leaders. It's all about leaders in command. So you've got your overall commander-in-chief here. We've got Liechtenstein. He's the overall army commander. And then we've got wing commanders. There's 3 wings. Here's Brown in the center. So Brown commands all of the units with the purple or the pink kind of lower right-hand corner. So all of this center here is under Brown's command, and then each of the 2 formations here, the purple and the pink, have their own sub-commanders. Leadership, very important. Leaders add their bonus to units they are stacked with or adjacent to, but they do have to be in command to their wing leader, and that wing leader has to be in command to their overall army commander. And you can see his command range is 12, his command range is 12. Here is Nadazdi down here, the Austrian cavalry. He's got a command range of 10. So you always count backwards from the unit to the overall commander, I believe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So yeah, I'd have to look at the rules. He's got a command range of 10 to his sub-commanders, and I believe he's got his command range of 12, so he can reach there. All the way in the north, we've got the right wing under Pallavicini. He's got a smaller force. Yeah, it's going to be the Austrians tend to occupy these fortified positions, so there's going to be a lot of tough repulses that the French are going to have to overcome. I'm just trying to look one more. Cavalry can charge in melee combat, but you're not allowed. It's difficult for cavalry to approach infantry, and if infantry approach cavalry, they automatically retreat. So it is very 18th century feeling. There's also some interesting rules about unit cohesion. So once you've expended your first volley and you want to do a second volley, as I was talking about, you have to check to see if the unit cohesion discipline falters, and if it does, then the unit goes under what's called a fire at will, or feu de biébod. And that will prevent them from doing a second volley, and that's one of the states they can be in. There's also disorder en route. But what's also cool is that initial volleys will put smoke markers on the map. Let's see if I can get a smoke marker. So, like, smoke markers will appear. after the first volley. So let's say he fired, we would put a smoke marker there. Units firing into or out of smoke or through the adjacent hexes of smoke suffer a degradation to their die roll, making it less likely for them to hit, which is kind of cool. So all these smoke markers will be all over the map. That plays a big role in the game. Yeah, so it just looks really interesting. There's some really interesting concepts here that I haven't seen in other games. And what I would really like to do is play this game and then play a couple of other sort of Age of Reason battle games to see how each of the rule sets stacks up against each other. Maybe do kind of a roundup video on each of the different systems. Banish All Their Fears just came out, but I'm waiting for that game's rules to kind of not be a mess before I try it. So yeah, let's talk quickly about victory conditions. So there's kind of like 2 steps to victory in this game. And by the way, the rule book is only 18 pages of rules, but you might want to read it pretty carefully because of the different concepts that you're finding in this game that are sort of unlike other games. So the first kind of level of victory is here. So what's going to happen is there are, I believe, 12 different hexes that the Austrian player at the start of the game is going to designate. He's going to designate 4 of them as possible objectives, and those are the ones that have the little angel symbol here. So here's Chemin Montal, here's Limoges, that's got one. And he's going to secretly select 4 of them, I believe. And then at the end of the 12th game turn, you will check to see how many they have, and depending on how many the Franco-Spanish player has achieved, they will either get victory or we'll go to the conditional draw state. So if I've only gotten 2 of the 4, then we go to conditional draw, then we do it by victory points, and that will determine who wins the game. Otherwise, if this Franco-Spanish player has not gotten any of the geographic objectives that they have decided to claim at the beginning of the game, then they will just automatically lose. So I'm looking at the map and trying to see like where some of these are. I'm gonna try and double blind this for myself by maybe selecting 4 randomly with like a biased die roll against them. Yeah, okay, so there's 8. So he needs to get 4 of the 8, not 12, I'm sorry. So here's 1, here's 2. There might be one under there. There's 3, 4, 5. And I'd have to find the other 3. But essentially they're all on the eastern side of the board, so they have to drive, here's some here. So they have to drive kind of the Austrians off. So, it looks like what would be the easiest path to do this? There's like this ditch and this river along here. A lot of Spanish units up here, but they're hampered by the terrain. Whereas the French down here have lots of cavalry, but it's a harder line to crack. And then they've got a bunch of units in the rear that have got to be brought up. So, I'm going to probably do it semi-randomly, so I don't quite know. That's the one element of this game that, like, playing it solo, both the victory conditions and the activation system. So there's this activation system where each side chooses the wing that they want to activate for the turn, first in the turn. Then they roll a die, and whoever rolls less has to reveal their choice. And then the player who rolled more decides whether they're going to go first or whether the other player is going to go first. And that is going to be tricky to do solo because knowing the information, you're not supposed to know the information that one of the players has every time you activate. So there's a little bit of a fog of war. I'm going to have to figure out a way around. But in general, it should be really fun and interesting to play this. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say right now. So we're going to get set up, and I'm going to try and run through the opening turn to see how it goes. I might stop in and show you what's happening, but it might be a little start and stoppy until I get it under my belt. But I do want to show you how the combat works because it's interesting, and I do want to show you how some of the maneuver works as well. It all looks to be like a very fun, nice, thematic, historical package with some great art, and the rules, props on the translation, they're very clear, at least as far as my reading goes. We'll see how it goes when I play it. So yeah, come back for the next video, and we will get started on Piacenza 1746.